That night in the sauna with my nephew was, without a doubt, one of the most powerful moments of my entire life. It was thrilling, confusing, and deeply moving, which is exactly why I need to share this story with you. Let me take you back to the beginning, so you can understand it for yourself. The evening air outside was cold, crisp, and perfectly still. But inside the sauna, a deep warmth wrapped around me like the most comforting embrace. The dim glow of the wooden panels, the rich scent of heated cedar, and the slow, rhythmic hiss of water on the hot stones, it created a moment of pure solitude I had been craving all day. I leaned back against the bench, stretching my legs, letting the heat sink deep into my bones. The house was silent. With my wife away on a trip, I had the place to myself. At least, that's what I thought. A faint creak of the sauna door sent a jolt of surprise through me, a shock that felt out of place in the relaxing heat. My eyes flicked open just as my nephew, Rick, stepped inside. He was wrapped in a towel, his hair still damp from a shower. A relaxed, easy smile was on his face. "Hey, Uncle," he said, his voice smooth and calm. "Hope you don't mind me joining. It's freezing out there." For a split second, I was frozen. I wasn't expecting company, and certainly not Rick. He'd arrived earlier that afternoon, visiting for a few days while he was in town for a training camp. I'd always been fond of him. He was easygoing, confident, and had grown into an impressive young man. But the surprise of him entering while I was naked left me speechless. "Oh, I hesitated, before managing a soft chuckle to mask my sudden unease. I wasn't expecting company. But, sure. Of course. He grinned, stepping fully inside and pulling the door shut behind him, sealing us in the intense heat. Figured I'd get some sauna time in before bed. Hope that's okay. I nodded, keeping my posture composed despite a sudden, sharp awareness of my own bare skin beneath the towel draped loosely over my lap. "Of course," I said, shifting slightly to give him space on the bench across from me. He let his towel fall off as well. And there we were. Both of us, exposed in the warm, dim light. I have to be honest, I couldn't help but notice him. And I have to admit, it was impressive. And if I'm truly bearing my soul here, it stirred something in me. A deep, unexpected excitement. He sat down, leaning back against the wooden wall with a content sigh as the warmth enveloped him. "Man, I forgot how good this feels. It's been a while since I used a real sauna." I nodded, feeling my pulse begin to steady. "It really helps you unwind. Especially after a long day." He stretched his legs out, his muscles flexing in the soft light. He had always been athletic, but now, seeing him as a full adult, there was an undeniable maturity to him. A powerful presence I hadn't fully appreciated until this very moment. And in that space, it was all completely visible. A comfortable silence settled over us, broken only by the soft crackle of the stones and the occasional drip of condensation from the ceiling. The heat wrapped around us, beads of sweat tracing paths down our skin. I resisted the urge to adjust my towel, not wanting to make this moment feel awkward. Rick was the one who broke the silence. "You know, I used to think saunas were just an excuse for old guys to sit around and talk about sports. But this actually feels incredible." I laughed lightly, tilting my head back against the warm wood. "It's more than that. It's about letting go. Even if it's just for a little while." "Yeah," he murmured, his tone turning thoughtful, softer than I expected. "Letting go sounds really nice right about now." His eyes met mine, and they lingered there for a second longer than felt casual. A new kind of tension settled between us, a silent, heavy awareness that hadn't been there before. I swallowed, trying to push the thought aside. "Rough week?" I asked. He exhaled, running a hand through his damp hair. "More like a rough couple of months. Training, school, expectations. Sometimes it all feels like too much." I offered a gentle smile. "You've always been a hard worker, Rick." But don't forget to enjoy the moment, too. He nodded slowly, his gaze intense and unreadable. That's what I'm trying to do right now. The way he said it, so quiet, so full of meaning, made my breath catch in my throat. The sauna suddenly felt much smaller. The heat felt more intense. My skin felt electric, hyper-aware of the thick, humid air. I reached for the ladle, pouring another scoop of water over the hot stones. Steam erupted instantly, billowing around us, making the air dense and heavy. As I set the ladle down, I felt Rick's gaze still on me. Watching. Observing. I wasn't sure what to do with that look. But to be completely honest with you, I didn't mind it at all. Look, the warmth of the sauna had always been my comfort, my sanctuary. A place to close my eyes and feel the weight of the world melt away. But now, with Rick sitting across from me, the atmosphere had shifted into something else. Something charged. Something significant. I didn't know if it was the way the steam swirled between us, making his figure seem hazy and dreamlike, or if it was the quiet, almost vulnerable edge in his voice when he spoke again. He shifted slightly, his towel loosening as he leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. It's weird, being back here, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. It feels like I'm stepping into an old life, but everything's different now. I nodded slowly, understanding that feeling more than I could say. Life has a way of doing that. You leave a place, you come back, and suddenly, nothing fits the way it used to. He let out a long breath, staring at the glowing embers behind the rocks. Yeah. It's strange. But it's nice, too. The sauna door rattled softly as a gust of wind pressed against it from outside. The sound seemed to break the spell, grounding us both back in the room. I reached up, brushing sweat from my forehead, and exhaled deeply. You should pour some water on the stones. It helps clear the mind. Rick took the ladle from my hand. His fingers grazed against mine for the briefest moment, and a jolt of warmth, different from the sauna's heat, spread up my arm. I focused on watching him instead, as he carefully poured the water, releasing another powerful wave of steam into the room. The temperature soared again, making my skin flush under the new intensity. He sat back, rolling his shoulders as if trying to shake off a heavy weight. You always know what to say, he murmured. It's kind of frustrating, actually. I raised an eyebrow, amused by the strange confession. Frustrating? He glanced up at me, his expression unreadable for a long moment. Then he laughed, shaking his head. Yeah. You just always seem so sure of everything. I let out a genuine chuckle, shaking my head. I assure you, I'm making most of it up as I go along. Rick smiled at that, a real, warm smile that reached his eyes. He leaned back against the wooden panels, his posture finally easing. Guess that makes two of us. The heat pressed against my skin in relentless waves as I shifted on the bench. The atmosphere remained thick, not just with steam, but with everything still hanging unspoken between us. Rick leaned back again, his eyes slipping shut. His chest rose and fell in slow, even rhythms. The rich scent of cedar and damp air wrapped around us in a heavy embrace, making the space feel incredibly intimate. A deep intuition told me something significant was happening. And I was right. I studied him then, the strong lines of his face, the way the sweat glistened on his skin. And I noticed, too, that he was studying me. More subtly. More secretly. He had grown into himself in ways I hadn't fully seen until now. The boy I'd watched over, the nephew I'd always seen as family, was now a man. A man who carried himself with a confidence that was both familiar and entirely new. The realization sent a powerful, undeniable feeling straight through me, something unsettling and thrilling, all at once. He let out a deep, slow breath, rolling his shoulders before his gaze flickered open and found mine. I missed this, he murmured. His voice was so quiet, it was almost lost in the hiss of the stones. But I heard it. And in those 3 words, I heard everything. Having a place to relax. To feel like I don't have to be constantly on edge. I smiled softly, nodding in a deep, shared understanding. It's good to have moments like this. To just be. No expectations. No performance. He studied me for a long, quiet moment. Something raw and unguarded flickered behind his eyes. You always make things seem so simple, he said, his voice a low, intimate murmur. Like the world isn't as complicated as it feels. But this time, his gaze wasn't sneaky or hidden. It was direct. It felt like an offering. Like he was handing me a key and waiting to see if I would use it. I tilted my head, my own heart beginning to beat a little harder against my ribs. Maybe it's just that I've learned to focus on the moments that truly matter. The rest, it all fades away, sooner or later. He exhaled, a small, genuine smile finally tugging at his lips. That sounds nice. A single bead of sweat traced a path down his temple, disappearing into the damp fabric at his shoulder. The movement was so simple, so human, yet it made me intensely aware of him. Of the charged space we shared. Of the mere inches of heated air between our bare skin. But then, the real conversation began. Rick let out a slow, measured breath, his fingers tapping a quiet, restless rhythm against the wooden bench. Do you ever feel like you're teetering on the edge of something? Like you're not sure if you should take the next step, or if you should just stay where you are because it feels safer? His words sent a ripple through me, deep and resonant. This was more than small talk. I turned my head, meeting his gaze. It was steady. Searching. He wasn't just asking for an answer, he was asking for permission. I exhaled, my own fingers gripping the bench beneath me. Yeah, I murmured, my voice hushed. Sometimes, taking that step means risking everything. And not knowing if it's the right move, that's the hardest part. He nodded, his expression thoughtful, but there was a new intensity lurking beneath his usual ease. Something heavier, more urgent. His eyes flickered over me, hesitant but not uncertain. What if you knew it was right? What if, deep down, you knew exactly what you wanted, but you were scared of what it might change? I swallowed. The weight of his words settled over me, as thick and pressing as the heat in the room. The shift between us was now undeniable. The air itself had changed. My voice was barely a whisper. Then I guess the question isn't about knowing what you want. It's about whether or not you're ready to face it. Rick's gaze darkened slightly, his fingers flexing against his knee. And if you never are, he asked, tilting his head just enough that I could see the subtle, nervous movement in his throat. What then? I inhaled sharply, a jolt of electricity coursing through me. There was something in the way he was looking at me, a vulnerability mixed with a fierce want that made my breath catch. My pulse hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the quiet room. Then maybe, I said, the words leaving me on a soft, shaky breath, it's already too late. His lips parted slightly, as if he was going to speak, but no sound came out. Instead, he shifted. His knee brushed against mine. It wasn't incidental. It wasn't an accident this time. It was deliberate. And it lingered. My breath hitched. Neither of us moved away. The sauna door creaked softly, a faint reminder of a world outside that felt a million miles away. In here, the only thing that existed was the diminishing space between us. The space that was closing, slowly, inevitably. Rick exhaled deeply, tilting his head back against the wooden wall. I could see the tension in his jaw, the effort it took to steady himself. I think I needed this more than I realized, he murmured, the confession hanging in the steam-filled air. I swallowed past the sudden, aching lump in my own throat. I'm glad, I said, though the words came out softer, richer, more meaningful than I had intended. The heat between us wasn't just from the sauna anymore. It was in the way his eyes held mine, refusing to look away. It was in the electric tension that stretched taut between us, like a wire about to snap. The room felt smaller, more intimate. Every breath, every slight movement, was amplified by the weight of everything we weren't saying. For the first time, I wasn't sure what I wanted more, to step away from the precipice, or to leap. Rick's voice dropped to a whisper, so quiet it was almost lost in the hiss of the stones. Do you ever think about the things you don't say out loud? I turned fully toward him, my heartbeat a deafening drum in my ears. All the time. His gaze didn't waver. And if you did? I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. Because I already knew. Once words are spoken, there's no taking them back. And we were already standing on the edge. The silence stretched, filled only by the gentle crackle of steam and the soft, rhythmic drip of condensation. I let my muscles relax, allowing the heat to finally chase away the last of my resistance. This was peace. This was connection. And then, perhaps because he felt that acceptance from me, Rick shifted again. His knee brushed against mine in the small space. It was a simple touch. A fleeting point of contact. But it sent a ripple of profound awareness through my entire body. I told myself it was nothing. Just the closeness of the sauna. The way a confined space can make everything feel more intimate. Then it really is. I forgot how peaceful it is here, he murmured after a long, comfortable pause. There's something about the quiet. It makes it easier to think. To feel. I nodded, my fingers absently tracing the edge of my towel. Sometimes we don't realize how much noise we carry with us, until we finally step into the silence. He exhaled, a soft, warm laugh that seemed to vibrate through the space between us. That sounds like something you'd say. I glanced at him, amused. Is that a bad thing? No, he admitted, his expression turning thoughtful, sincere. I think it's one of the things I've always liked about you. You see things differently. You feel things deeply. A genuine warmth settled in my chest, one that had absolutely nothing to do with the sauna. That's kind of you to say. He studied me, his expression open and unguarded. It's just the truth. I broke his gaze, focusing on the rising steam, on the intense sensation of the heat sinking into my skin. The moment felt heavier than it should have, filled with a potential I couldn't quite define. And yet, I didn't move. I let it linger. I let it settle between us like an unspoken understanding. The outside world felt impossibly far away, as if we were suspended in our own private universe, locked in this small, heated space where nothing else existed but the sound of our synchronized breathing and the profound weight of the silence between us. Rick exhaled, his shoulders sinking as he relaxed fully, tilting his head to watch me. I think I've spent so much time trying to figure everything out, that I forgot what it feels like to just be. I turned to him, meeting his gaze fully, allowing him to see the same recognition in my eyes. Maybe that's something you needed to be reminded of. A slow, beautiful smile curved his lips. Maybe. He leaned back, letting his eyes drift shut again, a picture of contentment. You always seem to know what I need to hear. I swallowed hard, my pretense fading away as I could no longer ignore the way his knee pressed against mine. This time, it wasn't a brush. It was a presence. A steady, warm pressure that felt like a question. The air between us pulsed with something undeniable, an awareness neither of us had given voice to yet, but we both felt it growing, expanding with every passing second. Rick's voice was lower, huskier, when he spoke again. Do you ever wonder if we stop ourselves from feeling things, just because we think we're not supposed to? The question sent a delicious shiver straight down my spine, a stark contrast to the oppressive heat. I turned my head, meeting his gaze, and felt my breath hitch at the raw intensity one found there. What do you mean? I asked, even though my pounding heart knew exactly what he meant. He let out a slow, controlled breath, running a hand through his damp hair. I don't know, he said softly, his voice laced with a vulnerability that cracked something open inside me. I feel like sometimes we ignore things that are right in front of us. Things we know are real, but we convince ourselves they're not. My fingers tightened around the edge of the bench. My pulse was a wild thing now, thrumming under my skin. "Rick," I started, but my voice faltered, betraying me. The words felt trapped, locked behind a wall of fear and exhilarating want. He exhaled sharply, a strained, nervous chuckle escaping him. "Sorry. I sound ridiculous." "No," I said quickly, shaking my head, my own voice firm with a certainty that surprised me. "You don't." His gaze flickered over me, searching, reading the hesitation and the undeniable answer that must have been plain in my expression. The space between us felt impossibly small, the weight of the moment pressing down on me, a sweet, heavy pressure. My skin burned not just from the heat, but from his closeness. From the way he was watching me, like I was the only thing in his world, waiting for me to acknowledge the truth we were both dancing around. "I don't know what's happening here," he admitted, his voice a whisper that was almost swallowed by the steam. "But I know I don't want to ignore it." I inhaled sharply, feeling the very axis of the world tilt beneath me. This was the moment. The moment I could shut this down, laugh it off, pretend nothing had changed. But I couldn't. Because everything had changed. I licked my lips, my throat suddenly dry. Rick. His name felt different on my tongue now. Sacred. It meant something more. His eyes darkened, his fingers twitching at his sides as if he was physically holding himself back from reaching for me. "Tell me to stop," he murmured, the words a low, desperate plea. "If you want me to stop, tell me now." I opened my mouth. But no words came out. Because I didn't want him to stop. And that terrifying, thrilling realization was the most honest thing I had felt in years. His jaw tightened as he studied my silent answer, my breath caught in my chest. He was waiting. Giving me one final chance to pull away. But I didn't move. I couldn't. The tension between us coiled tighter, the air thick and sweet with the weight of everything unsaid. My heart pounded against my ribs, a deafening rhythm that promised either ruin or redemption. Rick's fingers flexed at his sides, and then slowly, so slowly, he began to move. He exhaled a slow, shaky breath. "I feel like I've been waiting for this moment without even realizing it," he confessed, his voice barely above a whisper, thick with emotion. "And now that it's here, now that we're both just laid bare." I swallowed, trying to steady my racing heart. "Now that it's here?" I prompted softly. He shook his head slightly, a look of profound vulnerability in his eyes. "I don't think I can walk away from it. From this connection." My throat tightened, my pulse hammering under my skin. The heat in the sauna felt unbearable, but it wasn't from the steam. It was from the raw, emotional energy flowing between us. For a long, excruciating second, neither of us moved. The air pulsed, alive with everything we weren't saying. My breath hitched when Rick shifted. His knee pressed against mine again, not by accident this time, but with a quiet, deliberate intent. It was a question. A plea. I felt my pulse thrumming in my ears, my skin burning with something far deeper than the heat surrounding us. He exhaled a slow, measured breath, his eyes never leaving mine. "I don't think I can ignore this anymore," he admitted, his voice rough-edged with a desperate honesty. "And I don't think you want to either." 1,000 thoughts raced through my mind, each one colliding with the next. But none of them formed into words. Because he was right. I didn't want to ignore it. Not anymore. I was tired of pretending, of pushing this profound feeling away, of convincing myself that what I felt wasn't real. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. "Rick, He leaned in slightly, close enough that I could see the genuine emotion in his eyes, the way his lips parted as he waited for me to finish that sentence. But I didn't. I couldn't. Because in that moment, words felt useless. I was already leaning toward him before I realized it, before I could talk myself out of it, before I could remind myself of all the reasons why this connection shouldn't happen. And then the space between us disappeared entirely. It wasn't a physical act, but an emotional one. A silent, mutual surrender to the understanding that had been building between us all night. His breath mingled with mine, hot and unsteady, as his hand found mine, his fingers tentatively lacing through my own, waiting for me to pull away. But I didn't. The second our hands met, something inside me snapped. It felt like a dam breaking under the weight of a flood of emotion that had been building for far too long. His grip was firm but hesitant, as if he was still waiting for me to stop him. But I didn't stop him. I held on tighter instead, meeting him halfway. Closing what little emotional distance was left between us. The intensity between us burned hotter than the sauna itself, searing through every last bit of restraint that had kept us apart until now. His breath came in ragged bursts as he leaned his forehead against mine, a gesture of pure, unguarded connection. Every part of me felt alive, electric, as if I had been holding my breath for years and was only now learning how to breathe again. We stayed like that for what felt like an eternity, lost in the moment, in the sheer inevitability of this emotional release. The air was thick, suffocating, yet I couldn't get enough. My other hand found his shoulder, holding on as if he were an anchor in a storm I didn't know I was caught in. The intensity of it was dizzying, overwhelming, yet it felt so right. So real. Every shared breath, every moment of silence, was laced with something deeper, something we had been running from for too long. Eventually, the overwhelming wave of emotion began to recede, giving way to a breathless, peaceful silence. We stayed there, foreheads pressed together, hands still clasped, in the quiet aftermath. Our skin was slick with sweat, our chests rising and falling in unison. Rick exhaled a shaky breath, his fingers gently squeezing mine. "I don't regret it," he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. Not for a single second. I swallowed past the lump in my throat, my heart still echoing the profound experience we had just shared. "Neither do I." He pulled back just enough to look at me, his gaze searching mine for something, reassurance, understanding, maybe even permission to believe that this wasn't just a fleeting moment. I reached up, brushing my fingers along his jaw, tracing the sharp angles, feeling the dampness of his skin. It was a gesture of pure affection. "But we can't stay here forever," I admitted, my voice barely audible. He nodded slowly, his fingers tightening around mine for just a moment before he finally, reluctantly, let go. The weight of reality pressed in around us again, creeping back into the sacred space we had carved for ourselves in the heat of the sauna. But something had changed. Something irreversible. We both knew it. As we gathered ourselves, as we prepared to step back into the world outside these four walls, I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. And a huge part of me didn't want it to be. My breathing was still uneven, my body and soul still attuned to every word, every look, every point of contact we had shared. But reality was creeping back in, its grip tightening with every passing second. Rick sat back slightly, running a hand through his damp hair. He looked at me then, his eyes searching mine as if trying to decipher what came next. "Rick," I started, but my voice faltered. I wasn't even sure what I wanted to say. His gaze was soft, hesitant. "I know," he murmured. "We should probably talk about this. Right?" I let out a quiet, breathless laugh, shaking my head. "Yeah. Probably." But neither of us moved to leave. We stayed there, sitting in the heavy, significant quiet, the heat wrapping around us like a cocoon, delaying the inevitable. I could feel the weight of what we had just shared pressing down on me, not with regret, but with the immense realization that we had crossed a line that neither of us had truly been prepared to face. Rick exhaled, his voice softer when he spoke again. "I meant what I said. I don't regret it." I turned toward him, watching the honest certainty in his expression. It wasn't about a physical act, it was about the raw, emotional truth we had finally acknowledged. "I don't regret it either," I admitted. Something in him relaxed. But the truth wasn't enough to fix everything, it only made what came next harder. This connection, I said, choosing my words carefully. It doesn't change the world outside. It doesn't make things simpler. Rick let out a breath. Yeah. I figured you'd say that. It's not that. I stopped, sighing. This was never supposed to happen. And now that it has, I don't know what to do with these feelings. Rick shifted closer, not closing the distance completely, but enough that I could feel his comforting presence. We don't have to figure it all out right now, he said, his voice steady. But don't pretend this didn't mean something. I met his gaze, and for a long moment, neither of us spoke. Because he was right. It did mean something. Trying to act as if this profound connection hadn't happened would be the real lie. I don't know how to navigate this, I admitted. He exhaled, looking at me with an empathy that felt older than his years. Then we figure it out together. Carefully. The word together sent another wave of complicated emotions crashing over me. But beneath the uncertainty, there was something else, something steadier. Something real. The sound of the sauna door creaking open somewhere in the house startled both of us, yanking us back to reality. We stood, the moment officially over, left behind in the thick, humid air. But the weight of it followed us as we stepped out into the cooler air. The silence that stretched between us as we got ready to part for the night wasn't empty. It was filled with everything we had shared and everything we had yet to understand. He let out a breath and nodded. I'll see you in the morning, he said, his voice low. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. He lingered for just a moment longer before finally turning and walking away. I exhaled, the events of the night settling over me. For the following weeks, we existed in a new, unspoken space. We acted normal during the day, casual greetings, small talk over meals, but every moment felt heavier, as if we were both hyper-aware of the new layer to our relationship. The smallest things became significant, the way his eyes lingered when he thought I wasn't looking, the way my breath caught when our hands brushed accidentally, the silence that stretched a second too long whenever we were alone. It wasn't intentional, but it was there. Undeniable. Inescapable. Then came the night before he left. His bags were packed, sitting by the door. I told myself space would help provide clarity. But when he turned back to look at me, I saw it in his expression, the same hesitation, the same unspoken words. Uncle, he started, then stopped. I swallowed hard, forcing a kind smile. I know. And I did. We both did. No amount of distance would change the powerful emotional connection we had discovered. So I have to ask you, what do you think of all this? Is this kind of deep, unexpected, emotional connection okay? He is my nephew, and there is a significant age gap between us. How would you navigate these incredibly complex feelings? I'm struggling to make sense of it all, and I could really use some outside perspective. Let me know what you think in the comments. And thank you. Thank you so much for listening.